I love it. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and dive in and get started. We've got some more people here, and just want to go ahead and kick things off and say welcome to those of you that are here. We're excited to have you. We're excited for this conversation that we'll have today. It's going to be pretty informal. Justin and I have already chatted a little bit, and we've got kind of a list of questions that we want to go over to hopefully kind of cover this topic of how you can improve your relationships with your co-packers and your suppliers. And obviously, this applies to other businesses that are part of your supply chain as well. And we think this is um, a very timely time to talk about this stuff with all the issues in the supply chain that all of us have been experiencing, both from a business standpoint as consumers as well. And we're excited to have Justin here to offer his insight. So, Justin, I'll just let you introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, how you got to where you are, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Taylor. So, Justin Wall, I'm actually from Arkansas. So, I've been in Utah for about 4 years now. I came out here for school. So, I just graduated from BYU with a degree in experience design and management. So, very different from the manufacturing industry in general. So, I'm actually kind of a transplant to a lot of the co-packing spaces and those kinds of supplier relations. My background is actually kind of all over the place. Have an associate's degree in architecture drafting, went to school for engineering. I worked first at Dynamic as a project coordinator for a lot of our smaller accounts, a lot of brands that are starting to develop their own products, their own image. And we actually have a full turnkey service as a co-packer. So we kind of help take that idea from conception and then actually all the way through to finished goods. So I used to work in the event sphere. So thinking about supplier relations and a lot of the hurdles and challenges there, it's very different than manufacturing, specifically. But I think back to when I was doing drafting work, I actually did Walmart remodels, Sam's Club remodels. So I know more about the stores than I think I ever wanted to. And that, comes from living in Arkansas. But
Yeah.
heavily regulated industry, right? You had all kinds of codes and all kinds of requirements that you had to, shape up to. So industry, requirements for manufacturing is pretty much the same. You have the FDA that you have to talk to, other certifying bodies like the USDA. So understanding how to work and navigate those rules is kind of been like a huge opportunity to transfer a lot of those skills. So different industry, different experience, but I think largely the same. So being able to be at Dynamic for now a year and a half and work with a lot of our smaller clients, I feel like I have a really good idea of what some of those challenges are and hurdles are that brands face when they're trying to get into market. And, as a co-packer, how we can really be a successful partner in that goal and that initiative. So looking forward to all the questions, that we've got. Hopefully some of the things that we share will
Yeah,
be helpful, but I guess we'll see.
for sure. I think a lot of it will be super helpful. And I didn't say this yet, but if anyone has questions as we're talking, feel free to pop them into the chat. I might not answer them right when you put them in there, but if I don't, I'm going to save some of them for the end as well. But I know that sometimes as people are talking, the questions come to mind. Like, don't hesitate to just pop those in the chat, get them off your mind, and we'll definitely get to those as soon as we can. Thanks, Justin, for giving us a little bit about your background. That's cool that you were involved in kind of Sam's Club, Walmart builds, that kind of thing, and then have seen kind of the different aspects of the supply chain now being at Dynamic. And one of the reasons that we were so excited to have you on is because Dynamic has obviously been a great partner for us over the past years. I know that your company actually uses Fiddle and likes it and has had a lot of success with it. And because you guys are growing so much, right? Number 17 fastest growing co-packer on the Inc. 5000 list. At least that was 2020. And I don't know if in 21, if that's gone up or down, but one of the fastest growing co-packers in the US. And so just super excited about the value and kind of what you'll be able to share with brands. And for those of you who don't know me, which I think is most of you, because I'm kind of more behind the scenes here at Fiddle, I'm Taylor. I'm the marketing manager here. You're probably used to seeing Morgan on the webinars, and I had the chance to jump in today. I've been a part of Fiddle for about 6 months now, Before that, I was actually a partner in a CPG brand. It was a mostly direct to consumer online organic skincare brand based out of Utah here, and kind of helped run that company for a couple of years. Previous to that, had kind of helped start it and that kind of thing as well. And so it was actually started by my first wife, my late wife Laura, who started it because she was just super passionate about organic health. And this was like 10 plus years ago when kombucha was still like a product that you couldn't just find at your average store. Like you had to go to these niche health stores to find it, right? Um, and so I was honored to be able to carry on her business after she passed away. And now my brother and sister-in-law, who are my business partners, run that now. But I just learned a lot about the CPG space. I was more on the marketing side, but was involved with the manufacturing as well. And so really excited to just kind of bring some of that experience to the call today too. So, all right, so let's kick it off then. Justin, with the first question, we'll kind of start with the negative and then move to the positive. And the negative is good to talk about because they're things that, we want to make sure that we're trying to avoid. But what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that brands make when working with you guys?
Yeah. So I'll give this answer. And I mean, my background here, spent about a year working with a lot of our smaller accounts. So a lot of these challenges, a lot of these kind of hiccups come from just people being uneducated or not knowing, what they don't know about the industry. So I would say research is a really big part of a successful brand. You need to know like what your market is, your positioning strategy, your cost strategy, and really like where you want to be ending up. Because when you go into, and I'll say development before you go into manufacturing, you have to have a good idea on how you're going to control costs. For example, if you come in with this concept or idea, but you don't know maybe ideal ingredients, what your marketing ingredients are going to be, any of those things, we have an endless supply of resources, suppliers that we can go to and look for these things. But if there's no drive to maintain like a cost target, things can often grow just out of the fact that you don't know what else is out there. So doing research is a big piece. And then I think again the target for where you want to end up, so if you're moving toward that goal or not. Those are some of the bigger ones. Some of our bigger clients I've also been able to work with have kind of a variation of the same problem. They get so pigeonholed in this is our product and this is what it has to have, this is what it can't have, and they stop looking for alternatives, that when an issue or something arises and they don't know what their other options are, it takes a long time to pivot and to move so they can continue to grow and scale.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Like being able to come with you with like an actual goal in mind and knowing what their kind of financial targets are in general in their business, so that when they work with you guys and work on pricing and kind of the structure of the contract and the agreement and everything, there's kind of a target that you're trying to work for, that you're trying to look that you're trying to work toward, right? But then also having that flexibility with some of the ingredients that are used and where they come from and where they're sourced. I can see how that would be beneficial. And I know that a lot of the brands, like one of the differentiating factors of a lot of these newer brands coming into the marketplace, I would say over the past few years, with the kind of better for you trends and different products that are happening, a lot of the way that they're differentiating themselves is by saying like, this is the one ingredient that we use in our product, right? I remember with the skincare brand, we use this special salt. It's actually mined here in Utah, and it's a sea salt, and there's lots of sea salts, right? But there's special kind of organic chemical qualities of this salt that made us kind of stand out. And so I know that they would never want to change that salt, right? So
Yeah.
what kind of do you like when a brand's in that situation, when they're like, they're kind of, I don't want to say tied to in a bad way, but they've like made a promise that this is why their brand is special, and so this is the ingredient that they have to have. Is there like any advice that you give about how they can work around that and still, like be able to have like backup options and other stuff like that?
Yeah, and it is hard because Dynamic works with a ton of different brands, so it's a high mix, and we do try and maintain those low volumes. So we see a lot of this come up where they're like, I've got this key ingredient. It could be this really unique salt, the unicorn tears, the whatever it is that makes that product unique.
Yeah.
And again, with doing the research, they haven't gone all the way up the chain to know like, is this a safe supply? It'll be continuous supply. Does this supplier go through different like periods of production? For example, one of our bigger clients, one ingredient for the product takes 4 months to manufacture. And so they continued to
Wow.
scale and hit rapid growth, but it ended up coming to the point where we couldn't get enough of that ingredient in order to continue to do business with them. Like they couldn't handle us, I guess, if you could say. And so that put a cap on the scaling unless we were able to pivot. And luckily, we were able to find another alternative very quickly. And as part of that
Okay.
continual innovating, the end product actually ended up being better than it was before. So even with this unique ingredient, making a swap improved the product and the brand overall. So
Okay.
it's hard. Like in this situation, always have that conversation with your vendors, understand their process, what they need in order to get that to you, and try and get an idea on like as you scale, is there anything you should be concerned about?
Okay. That totally makes sense. So like not necessarily shying away from having that unique um, supplier, that unique ingredient in your product, but kind of having a little bit of foresight and thinking through the fact that like if you choose something that's too unique and in too short of supply, like it could affect your business down the road. And so figure out like what's something that can make us special, but that has some scalability to it and has some kind of like some safety measures that we can put in place where we're not going to run out of stock because our suppliers backed up for 4 months and that kind of thing. So those are all cool, and those are things that I'm guessing. Those are kind of signs that you're working with the right co-packer when you're like developing your product and your co-packers encouraging you to ask those questions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So let's kind of pivot in the other direction. What are some of the things that the successful brands that you work with are doing right as they approach the process? And obviously, we could talk just about the opposite of what you just said, but is there anything else that kind of comes to mind with kind of what the successful brands are doing right when they work with you?
Yeah. And it is funny. Like, I think the first time I ever had a client come to me and say, here are the finished product specifications for my brand that need to be hit. Here's the components that go in. Here's how it's made. And I think all of us here were just like floored. We're like, we got one, someone did it. And the
Yeah.
process was super simple. I mean, it took very little time. It was painless. It was exactly what they wanted it to be, and we were off to the races. Um, with that scenario I gave before, where that one ingredient took 4 months to manufacture, it was interesting to me to be in those conversations with the client where their development team already had four other alternatives in the works. Samples made in like a extended stability testing to kind of evaluate other options. So essentially, they had never stopped innovating. And I think that's a huge piece. Like some of the most successful people have been on top of their product development, their brand management, and they're constantly, watching to see what the market's going to do and where the interests are going to kind of trend towards. And then they have something in the works, and like you can always spend time preparing for the future. And sometimes you don't know necessarily what's going to come down the line, but I think don't assume that your brand is finished when you have the product you're looking for. Like always be looking for the next step, the next improvement, the next development.
Okay, cool. That totally makes sense. And this next question kind of segues a little bit from what you mentioned when you first started, and that is that you started when you first started at Dynamic, you were working with some of the smaller brands, right? Some of the brands that were just getting launched and getting started. And so this next question is probably more geared towards them, and that is how can brands, and well, it's geared towards all brands, but I think when we're first starting out and we're kind of bootstrapping, right, we want to be able to get the best deal that we can and be able to kind of make things as um, efficiently but as also cost effectively as possible. So what are some ways that brands can really save money while still ensuring quality work and ensuring a good kind of back and forth with the co-packer where they don't where the co-packer doesn't feel like the brand's being cheap and the brand doesn't feel like the co-packer's trying to rip them off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Um, I saw one of the comments, and it said like we have a very unique process of our product. So not sure if there are co-packers that can do this. And I think that's a really interesting point because Dynamic is a very innovative co-packer. We have a lot of clients that have a lot of like very intricate blends, intricate packaging needs, and that we've been able to kind of satisfy, throughout. But in and of itself, that makes it really difficult for you and for us to scale because we have the human element where we can be very customized, but that really only works for lower quantities because once you start to grow and scale, that kind of becomes your pinch point. Like we can only make it so fast, we can only make it so cheap. So I think when you're thinking about cost and trying to keep things down, having, I mean, simple and automated is always going to be the ideal. So if your product is something that we can run through our production lines where we really only touch it once or twice in the process, you're going to get really great cost savings just in and of itself. The labor will drop out. The other piece is also ingredients and looking for those quality ingredients. You might have this really super organic flower oil that's only found in like Madagascar, and like, you think like that's the one. But again, with doing your research and understanding, like you could source it from there and pay heavy import fees, and it's they have their own team of people that are harvesting these and doing all of those things. Or you can look for where the supply chain is innovated and grown and developed. You can get cost benefits getting something that's the same or similar that meets the same marketing claim, right? So just understanding that you're not necessarily sacrificing, like I can have a really high quality product that's super expensive, or I can have a really cheap product that's really, lower quality. There is a middle ground, and there's a wide variety of options in the middle. So Dynamic, we love to have conversations about that all the time. We're kind of biased towards the more natural ingredients anyway. So typically when we're formulating with people, like we keep that in mind, and that's what we prefer. But just to
Cool.
kind of keep that in mind, like you don't have to have one or the other. There's a huge middle ground. Just understand what's available.
Okay. That totally makes sense. So kind of try to be flexible with kind of what you're offering. I mean, it's kind of the same thing that we've already talked about. And if you're talking to a co-packer that doesn't want you to be flexible or isn't allowing you to be flexible, that's probably a good sign that it's not the right co-packer for you, right?
Yeah, you need a partner, someone's going to work with you. So you definitely got
For
to find the
sure.
right fit.
For sure. And Denise, to piggyback off of what Justin said, asking about, how to find a co-packer that makes a product that is out of the norm a little bit. Justin, I've heard this, and you can tell me if it's true or not, because I've never worked for a co-packer, but I've heard that co-packers are pretty networked in that, like, if you guys can't handle a product, like you're happy to refer that to another co-packer that or vice versa, because there's more than enough business to go around for everyone. So there's kind of an abundance mentality. Do you feel like that's true?
Absolutely. There are probably four other manufacturers just in this whole I-15 corridor here in Utah that we talk to frequently. We'll get referrals from them and pass others off if we're not the best fit, we're not going to try and tie that up and get the business. Like we want you to be successful. So we're not going to get in the way of your brand, just out of selfishness. So we'd absolutely we'll refer people all over the place. And then always the people that started Dynamic have networks from previous industries that they're bringing in. So oftentimes we're able to find a solution even if we can't do it.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. So Denise, I don't know if that answer helps at all. So try working with a co-packer first and ask them if they can't do it. Hopefully they can refer you to someone else who can't. And if you've tried that and that hasn't worked, like feel free to contact us. You can send us an email. In fact, it's probably best to contact Morgan here. So send an email to morgan@fiddle.io, and he can kind of do some digging on our end a little bit, because we've got quite an extensive network of co-packers and suppliers that either use our software or that we know. And obviously we can tap into Justin as well to kind of help out with that a little bit. And yes, we do have networks on the East Coast. And Justin, that might have actually been for you. Like, are you guys connected, or networked with any co-packers on the East Coast?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the type of product. A lot of our executive team came from like the pharma industry. So East Coast is big pharma. He actually did consulting and work with like J&J and some of those people. And then some of the other like more cosmetic and dietary, we have some other contacts like in Florida and some other places. So it just depends. Yeah, just let us know what you're looking for. And it's funny too, like packaging suppliers. I've had several referrals come from a packaging supplier for someone looking for a manufacturer. So it doesn't just have to be in, a manufacturer or co-packer space. Go up the chain from where you buy your bottles or tubes or labels, and oftentimes they know people as well.
Cool. Right. Okay, cool. So kind of just start with the people that supply and make the products and stuff and see where it takes you.
Mhm.
Nice. And Ron, I see your questions here about kind of finding good qualified co-packers specifically for those products that you mentioned. And I think Morgan will probably be the best one to be able to help with that. I know that Dynamic, you guys don't do any like food, right? You guys are mostly doing kind of beauty and supplements and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Or do you do food stuff as well?
we can technically do food stuff, but again, as far as what our wheelhouse is and where we're going to be able to provide the best cost benefits, it's definitely more in the cosmetics and supplements realm.
Okay, cool. All right. So Ron, yeah, go ahead and shoot an email to morgan@fiddle.io. And after rereading your questions, it looks like you're looking for someone kind of more in the Midwest or Northeast as well. So we'll try and narrow it down a little bit. And yes, I will post it. Thank you for asking. Actually, I probably should have done that before. I will post my email Morgan's email in here. And Justin, if you'll pop yours in there too, that way people know how they can contact you. And here's also mine. I'll probably just tell you to talk to Morgan, but you can always contact me too. This is awesome. This is great. So we've gone over kind of what the negative things are to try and avoid doing. We've gone over some of the positive stuff. We've gone over, kind of how to have a good ongoing relationship with the co-packer and how to ensure that the work's, the high quality, but still affordable and kind of makes sense for both sides. So kind of extending a little further beyond that, what do you feel like are some of the keys to a really good long-term partnership where the brand's happy and the co-packer's happy?
Yeah, and that's a great question. The longer I've been in this industry, the more I really feel like this is about relationships. It's still about people. Even though we're making, consumer packaged goods and, working on brand development, like you're still going to have a point of contact with a co-packer. You're going to start to build relationships with your suppliers if you're kind of managing more of your own supply chain. And that's going to be critical, just understanding that you are working with people and to try and be accommodating. Dynamic has really taken a huge investment in our client base and trying to help them develop, innovate in their products, answer questions wherever we can. We frankly are doing a lot of consulting just in the part of the process, which is fun. And so be willing to kind of like ask those questions, get those answers, and honestly take their advice, because I'm a guess the co-packers have been doing this so much, they really can provide insight that you may not be able to see. And that may not be true every time, but just remember that you're like working with people. And then just going back to some comments earlier, when you have a good idea of what you want to see as a result, co-packers do their best work. Dynamic is a contract manufacturer, which simply means like you tell us exactly what you want and we do it. So the more explicit, the more clear the expectation or the goal for your brand, the better we are able to perform. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. We can take a concept and help you build an idea. Sometimes when you're making the request and there isn't a ton of direction, that's where things can get a little squirrely, but we try to help clarify things as much as possible throughout the process. So that's probably a big thing for your partners. If you're not feeling like you're getting a lot of that back, if they're just kind of taking it and run with it and you're not really sure what to expect as a result, that might be a red flag.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So, I mean, it kind of comes down to, we kind of keep coming back to the same topic of the more kind of prepared you are beforehand, right? And the more you know what your goals are, the more you've worked out the numbers on your end, and the more you know what you want, the more kind of effective and long-term the relationship with your co-packer, your co-manufacturer can end up being, but you still got to be flexible, of course, right? There's a little bit of flexibility. And then just like everything else in business comes down to, treating each other with kindness, with respect, knowing that it's people on both sides. And everyone's trying to make a living and trying to provide for their families and reach their goals and that kind of thing. And so the more we can kind of work together to help each other with that, the better, I think.
Mhm.
This is awesome. So we're getting close to the end. So I'm going to ask Justin just kind of some of his thoughts about the supply chain and kind of some of the issues caused by the pandemic. But before I do that, I just want to throw out there to everyone that's on. If you have any other questions or anything else that's come up, feel free to throw them in the chat now. And then after Justin's done kind of speaking to pandemic supply chain stuff, we can pop back over to the chat and reply to those before we wrap up. So Justin, thoughts on supply chain? We're a year and a half plus into COVID. Things have gotten worse in some parts, better in other parts. I guess just in general, tell me what some of your thoughts are on how things are going, and also I guess throw in there some hope if you can, as far as like what we can do to plan and still survive and thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, just all of the different issues and challenges that we've seen, because the initial delays came from everything shutting down. So they just weren't making product. Now they're making product, but they can't get it, overseas because the workforce has been so sparse. They literally can't unload the ships. And so supply chain wasn't built overnight and it won't recover overnight, which is unfortunate. But the fact that there is a lead time now is, I think, a ray of hope. Like, whereas before it may have been 4 to 6 weeks, which is now 8 to 11, at least we're getting it in 11 weeks, whereas we weren't getting it at all. So things are kind of limping back to, working and flowing again. I think we'll see the most improvement when people are able to go back and actually be present and working, whether it's local laws, regulations, or international, requirements that keep people from working, or if it's just people's concern over, the COVID pandemic and personally, health of their family, health themselves. I'm not sure, and it probably is all of the above. But things are slowly improving and getting back to where they need to be. I feel like the motto for this whole last couple of months has been the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So with a lot of our vendors, like, we need something and we need it bad, and for our clients, we are calling them every day and asking about updates, asking where it's at, asking what needs to happen. And we have seen a lot of, I would call them successes or wins, getting product moved that otherwise would have been sitting stagnant. And that maybe it's a testament to Dynamics, just spunk, or get it done attitude, or tenacity, whatever you want it to be. But we're able to have those relationships with our vendors so that we can kind of move mountains and keep people moving. Specific to that, one client with a 4-month lead time on an ingredient that we ran out of, being able to pivot, set up a new relationship, and get everything in at pace, was a huge success. So it is still a challenge. Build that into your timelines. If you're launching, just extend that time as much as you can, understanding that, like, your co-packers and suppliers are going to be up against these same timelines. But if you understand that, it's part of that research phase. You build that all in. The development process, launch, scaling, all of that is super smooth and super clean. But when we find ourselves in that, like, pinch point where we're trying to, like, scramble and find something to try and meet a deadline that missed one of these other lead times, and it's a stressful thing for everyone. But it'll continue to get better. I don't think that the world could handle shutting down like it did again. So I think we'll just continue either at the pace that we're at, or people will continue to innovate in their own sectors and automate tasks, so, like, we won't need as much of a workforce, and then we'll be able to begin getting everything out that we need to. So hopefully that helps.
Awesome. No, totally. I think that helps a lot. I think your kind of comment that you started with, that the global supply chain wasn't built overnight, and it's not going to be destroyed or kind of completely broken down overnight, or even, over the course of years, I think rings true. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. So, like we talked about, still be kind and be respectful of your co-packer, but don't be afraid to continue to follow up and kind of, give those friendly nudges and friendly reminders for things that you need help with and vice versa. So I think that's solid. I like it. And I'll just go ahead and kind of slide in real quick and give a plug for Fiddle. I think most of you already know about what Fiddle does, but really what Justin was talking about, and with all this stuff with supply chain and lead times, and making sure that you can fulfill your orders on time, being able to create your products the way that you need to. That's really what Fiddle was built for. We know that most people are tracking in spreadsheets, and that's how we all start. And spreadsheets, depending on how good you are at spreadsheets, they can take you pretty far. Some people, I've talked to some CPG consultants that that think that you can build your business into the 20, 30, 40 million dollar range and run it off of a spreadsheet. And then I talked to some other brands that, like, once they've got their retail stores and their online orders, they're like spreadsheets are already breaking. So it kind of depends on who you are and kind of how you work. But if you are kind of tired of doing it in your spreadsheets, that don't feel like it's working, or you're using other software and you don't feel like it's really coming up to snuff, and you're not really getting your needs met from it, Fiddle will help you keep track of all of your BOMs, all of your product costing, all of your ingredients, all of your supplies, being able to track your co-packers that you buy those from as well, being able to send POs to them quickly when you run out, so helping with with reorder points, and also being able to track all your levels of inventory between your raws and your finished goods, lot numbers, batch records. There's a lot of different stuff. I don't want to throw up all of our features, but if that's something that you feel like you need help with, feel free to go to our website and schedule a demo, or again, just reach out to either me or Morgan and we can help facilitate that for you. Justin, I'd love for you to make a plug for Dynamic and leave us with any other thoughts or words of wisdom that you might have for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Taylor. Dynamic blending has been around for several years now. I think we're going on year 7, and manufacturing for 5 or 6. So we're young, we're scrappy, but we've been on the Inc. 5000 list 2 years in a row now. We've hit tremendous growth. We really have had a great opportunity to position ourselves as an innovative co-packer, contract manufacturer for any job quantities. We've tried to maintain low MOQs of 1,000 units, kind of across the board. So we try to lower that barrier to entry for some of our smaller clients, a lot of them were mom and pop shops that were doing this in their garage and are ready to kind of scale and grow. So we extend that opportunity to them. We're a full turnkey manufacturer. So if you've got an idea for a product, we can take that, develop a product for you, identify the supply chains, manufacture, and we have fulfillment partners that we can refer you to, so that it's like a one-stop shop and your product is out to market. So we really try to focus on the innovation side. We have a great team that's used to the customization and the high mix. So again, with some of those more complicated packaging processes, we've done a lot of that, where we can be hands-on when we need to, and we can be fully automated else, whatever the need may be. So we really focus on the cosmetic, personal cares, CBD, and dietary kind of markets. We do a lot of CBD products, and we've been able to kind of put it in all forms. We are OTC drugs registered, so we can do hand sanitizers, OTC fluoride toothpaste. We've gone through the registration process, so we can talk you through that as well. There are some higher minimums because the costs are higher, but that's understandable. So if you really want to know what we're about, I would say start at our website. And if you like what you see, you can put in a request through our online portal, and we've got a great sales team that'll be in contact pretty quickly to let you know what we can do for you. And then to some of the other questions, if you're trying to find the right co-packer, if we can't do it, always ask if there's someone that comes to mind that we could refer you to, and I'm sure we can start you moving in the right direction. We've heard of a lot of successes doing that. So we're just glad that if we could play a part in that, then let us play a part in that, So that's dynamic blending, and we've got plenty of room for more business, more growth. We're growing, scaling, and putting product out, but we pivot pretty quick. So
Awesome. Well, hey, Justin, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your insight and helping me and helping some of our customers understand better how they can improve their relationships with you guys and with suppliers. And for those of you still on here, for those of you that are listening to the recording, feel free to reach out to Justin. Like you probably gathered at this point. He's a nice guy. The whole team there is. So this isn't necessarily a plug to work with them, though. If that's what you want to do, you can. But they're just a great resource that can help point you in the right direction if you have just general questions about co-packing and working with suppliers and that kind of thing. So don't hesitate to reach out to him. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, it's Justin at dynamicblending.com for him. For us, you can contact me, Taylor at fiddle.io, and be happy to point you in the right direction as well with that. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.